Hello and welcome to the King Pie podcast. It's been 1 week since the T20 World Cup 2022 came to an end. England beat Pakistan in the World Cup final by 5 wickets to claim their second T20 World Cup title. And uh, the person who is with me right now can probably explain the final best to me. So, Stuff, it's been 1 week. So, has it settled in and how are you doing?
I'm settling in about as well as you can after losing a World Cup final. Um, yeah, I guess like the realization started to settle in quicker this time than it did after the semifinal last time out because the game didn't swing so quickly like it did against Australia last year. And also, we didn't win every game going into this final like we did against Australia, like we did in the World Cup last year. So yeah, you just gotta get back up eventually because the cricket calendar never stops.
And another thing that it might sound a little negative on front, but I felt like from out of the four teams that made it to the knockouts, felt like in India, England, and Pakistan all had their outlying issues. While England looked kind of the side that was ready to cover any of their issues that they didn't it. Obviously, Pakistan and India had their issues with the batting, and so were New Zealand, while England were looking pretty assured on both batting and bowling.
Yeah, like I would say England were the best team at the World Cup. It's a completely deserved win. They barring that one freak loss to Ireland, they won every other game. They looked like they were covering their bases, and they won the semi-final in convincing fashion. They won the final reasonably comfortably after some early scares. And yeah, like England have been a really good T20 side since mid 2015, and this is this was the culmination of all of that. They came close in 2016. They came close in 2021. They came close. So so yeah, coming into 2022, they were definitely one of the favorites going into the tournament, and they showed it.
And the big thing is, as you said, they have been a great side in white ball since mid 2015. But even though we have seen their new template for what now, 7 years, more than 7 years, yet every time when they win an ICC final, it is not really that template, but actually more of kind of a struggle or a skirmish, especially involving Ben Stokes in some capacity. And it kind of solidifies that belief where that they are not the kind of just the kind of side that can go hard, but they also have people who can you know uh, double down when the going gets tough.
Yeah, finals are always tough to win because there's always a lot of pressure on everyone. And yeah, just having a player that can shut out the noise, it's always very valuable. That's what Ben Stokes he did in 2019. He's done it here. He's done it in some matches in between, which may not have been as pressurized, but still very. He's always someone that rises to the moment. Is what gets said a lot. I do think that like if we're gonna talk about his innings a little more, the way it started, it probably added to the pressure, but like he was able to claw it back later, and like there's nobody better than him at dealing with the pressure that he started putting on the team with the way his innings started.
And the interesting thing is with Ben Stokes that even though when you see that phase from over number 11 to 15 where there it was starting to get solo, that it was around 70, 75 at one point. But with him and some other people from the past that we're not going to talk about here, is that once they have a target in hand, you can clearly see them trusting themselves, to chase the target, uh, regardless of whatever is happening on the other side. There may be a collapse, or maybe the run scoring has completely slowed down. But yes, as I said, Ben Stokes, even the ones, the one innings that we are not going to talk about here, or even the World Cup final from 2019. Every time you see, the situation is almost the same. I think he backs himself to get the target, that is on the hand, and seems like that is his specialty. I mean, he always hangs around till the end and ultimately ends up, uh, I guess, crossing the target.
He's the type of player that just backs himself to get the job done, regardless of how he needs to get there. And yeah, like it would have been a big problem for England had Ben Stokes gotten dismissed when he was 14 off 21 and the required run rate was climbing up. But he is the guy that made up for the dot ball he was taking up earlier. He wasn't dwelling on a lot of the plays and misses that Nassim Shah in particular was getting out of him, and also the other bowlers were really getting to the England batters. Like Pakistan's fast bowlers in particular were causing a lot of trouble, but they weren't getting the wickets, and that was good enough for Stokes to make up for it later.
Yeah, so actually, that makes me curious. Is Ben Stokes really good at chasing targets, or was the issue that he was not really good with setting targets? Because every time he has failed in an ICC trophy final, or in even any knockout game, is when England were batting first, and when he has done well is when England were batting second. So it kind of begs a two-sided question, actually, from whatever side you want to look at. Whether Ben Stokes is really good at chasing, like obviously you can also add Headingley to that, which is also a great chase, and that is kind of a question, isn't it? That does Ben Stokes sometime get stuck while batting first, or like he does really well while batting second?
Yeah, like it's easier to bat second because you just know like what's needed of you. So yeah, like you brought up the 2017 Champions Trophy semifinal, where I think he made like 50 off 103 or something like that. And yeah, like he was just he was in that same sort of battling mood, just trying to stick around and then make up for the runs later. But it's also a situation where England didn't really know how much they needed to win because yeah, like it was a sluggish pitch in Cardiff, and the England top order struggled. So Stokes going really slowly, uh, like that, like they might have thought that that was what was needed on a very difficult pitch, but then Pakistan come out and bat and make a mockery of it. Because again, like batting first, you like yeah, like just batting first, you don't know what's needed of you, and England didn't know in that game. England didn't really know in the 2016 final, and yeah, like it all went wrong for Stokes in the 2016 final with the ball, and I do think Stokes is a better batter than a bowler, so that's a part of it. I think it's like if he needed to chase 20 or 19 runs off six balls, uh, I I wouldn't be too surprised if he could do it, but I'd be more surprised if he could defend that with the ball because he's not as good of a bowler as he's a batter. But it also just like goes into another thing about cricket where it's just like there's almost like it's just easier for batters to get the job done than it is for bowlers, right? Because it just feels like batters are more in control of any given situation than the bowlers are. Uh, so yeah, just going back to the original question of is Stokes a better chaser than he is a better setter? Yeah, probably because it just like suits his style of play better, knowing exactly what you need to do. Because he's the guy that can. He's not going to be overwhelmed by the task of what's required. He just sort of needs to know what's required in the first place.
And I think you raise up a good point about how bowlers have it much harder than batters. I mean, obviously, if you look, I mean, this conversation has now gone on for 100 plus years, whether you know cricket is too friendly to the batters, and I mean, T20 is that kind of game, where obviously cricket has always been that kind of game that favors batter, but T20 kind of takes to the extreme with all the kind of help, little helps that it brings to the batters, and it is kind of a thing, isn't it? We have seen now what 10 back-to-back T20 World Cup knockout games where teams have chased and they've won. This started back with the 2014 semi-final, second one between India and South Africa. From then on, we have seen only the team that chases and ends up winning, which is kind of you know understandable because most of these knockout games have been played at night, and it has almost kind of been a pattern where pitch starts off okayish and then gets better for batting as the time goes on. I mean, you can remember the 2014 final or the 2016. 2016 was more of neck and neck thing, but 2021 was the case where honestly uh, batting second seemed easier, and this was seemingly also the case in final where when Pakistan were batting, the pitches were looking pretty sluggish, I guess. So ultimately, do you think there can there can be or there should be something done to maybe even out the odds, or is this how the game is?
Yeah, I don't think there's much you can really do about it. It's just how cricket is. It's all about the confidence, it's all about the mindset of the players, and for a lot of them, just chasing is easier because you know what you have to do.
And the interesting thing is, maybe once in a while you could spring up the idea of maybe having these knockout games in maybe in afternoon, or maybe start a little early, but seems like the evening slot has the prime time look or vibe to it, I guess, which forces these games to start or be organized at that time. But do you think it would help a little if you know the knockout games were probably starting in the evening time rather than actually late at night?
Well, I can remember one knockout game in particular that was a day game. That was the 2017 Champions Trophy final, and we know how that ended for the chasing team.
Actually, I'm talking about T20 ones actually, because 50 over knockouts have rather been well balanced than T20s.
Yeah, I mean, like they could, but it's just like I don't know, like it feels because like you want as many people to be able to watch this game as possible. You want it to be convenient for people going to the stadium to watch the game. So like it just makes sense to make it an evening game because like a night game, like all big events are night games, right? Usually under the floodlights, under in that evening slot where people are coming home from work or just a long day, and having a nice night out watching the cricket, watching the big final. Like this stuff is always like it should honestly always be night games. Like I when they when they do ODI events in England, the finals, most of the big games are day games because it's a more convenient time slot for the South Asian market. And I think that's kind of silly because it makes it less appealing to go to for people in England because it starts earlier and it ends earlier. And yeah, like I think all of these should be night games or day night games. I don't. and like, I don't think it make like there's always talk about competitive balance and whatever. But I think like for these games, you want them to be proper events, showpiece events to show to people. You want them to attract the biggest audiences. You want them to you get as many people into the stands as possible, and that's always easier to do if the games are night games. Like it just makes it a bigger event to watch. And yeah, like competitive balance. It's not. It's not that big of a deal. I just say like I don't think the games being day games or night games is what swings. It's so much in favor of the chasing team. I think it's just the mindset of the players and just how uh, a lot of them are used to playing cricket anyways. Because if you look at the stats over the last few years, chasing is always like the team batting second has a significantly higher percentage of wins than the team batting first, even across all T20s, in the IPL and the PSL and most leagues. It's just how T20 cricket has developed because again it goes back to batters knowing what they need and also just batters having a greater ability to do what the batters have more control over the situation than bowlers do. So it ends up being easier to chase. And I think that's regardless of conditions. Really, I don't think making it a day game would change things that much, aside from just making the event feel a little not as not as big of a deal if it's if all of these are day games and not under the floodlights.
Also, the fact that the chasing teams do not panic as much as they used to, you know, back in the 2000 early 2010s or late 2000s, where a required rate of 10 would be pretty panic inducing, whereas these days even 13 or in some cases 14 is considered kind of gettable. Actually most of the times, if you are supposed to get like a 12 or 13 in the last 4 or 5 overs, teams back themselves to get it. And moving on, as we have talked about Ben Stokes and England, I think we can also talk about their other campaigns. I mean, they have also made it to the two other finals in the ICC tournaments that took place this year, and looks like their template of having, of playing this aggressive brand of cricket has worked across genders and age levels, I guess.
Yeah, like it's not the exact same way they play in the other. They don't play this way at U19 level. They don't play exactly this way at women's level. But yeah, it's just like it's been a good year for England.
I mean, you say they do not play this way on the under 19 level, but I have the semi final of under 19 World Cup this year of England versus South Africa. That would beg to differ, but yeah, that's not the point here. But actually, I think they have adopted kind of a similar strategy. I mean, not it is not exactly the same, but feels like there's some version of it working on different levels, I guess. I mean, even if you see in the women's team, I guess they look to be much more positive with the batting depending on more aggressive batters. Even, I mean, also there's Nat Silver, there's Danny Wyatt, there's Amy Jones, who all of whom like to play much more positively. They've also added Sophia Dunkley, who is also mostly an aggressive batter. So seems like it is kind of something that is in works, while it not might be the same as the men's senior side, but looks like it is also some a little different or their own version of that approach.
Like they've shown that this is a way you can win matches. So if you have the personnel for it, so I think once they find the personnel for it, they can adapt the other teams to start playing like those. and they seem to have done that with the women's team, especially having a lot of players of similar archetypes to the ones in the men's team to at least get started on the process of playing like this because the men's team shows that it does work even against the best teams, and that's what the women need, right? You gotta find some way to dethrone Australia.
And the funny thing is, there have been three ICC tournaments this year, and in all of the three, there's been a semi-final with England in it, and England have just decimated whatever opposition they have gotten in that. I mean, in the under 19 World Cup and the women's 50 over World Cup, they got South Africa, where basically both were one-sided games, and we've seen what they did with India. So it does look like England have developed a lot, but actually, I really wanted to talk about one guy that has come out of that under 19 World Cup for England, and that is James Rew, because I've seen a little bit of him in county as well, and he looks promising. And the biggest thing was, especially in the final where they were 90 odd for 7, and he still went on to make 95 and get his team to 190. And that kind of brought us back to the memory of Ben Stokes and what he has achieved here or in the 2019 World Cup.
Yeah, like Rue's a promising player. I'd be surprised if he doesn't end up playing for England, but like there's always a lot that can go wrong in the transition from U19 to senior. He's done quite well for I think it's Somerset who he plays for, and yeah, just another year or two like this, and he'll be out there with Stokes. Yeah, he's I don't think they've named the squads yet for Pakistan, but there's a lot of talk of him being in it. Actually, no, they did name it, and I think he is in the squad.
Yep, he is
Yeah,
in it.
yeah. So, yeah, if England go for a particular way of packing their team with spinners, he's very close to a Test debut, so it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But yeah, again, he's another promising player that England will hope develops into something really good.
And it does go really well with England's brand of cricket right now, doesn't it? I mean, we have just talked about how even though they kind of fashion this aggressive brand of cricket, but we have seen them big win the tournament finals by fighting it out. And even in the under 19 World Cup final, even though they lost, I think to make the match make the match so competitive even after being 90 for 7 was, I think, a really big achievement. And the at one point it even looked like they had an outside chance to win the game itself.
I think outside chance is a little generous. I don't think India were ever in that much trouble during the chase. Um, yeah, like if it reminds you of any Stokes in it, it'll be the one of the 2017 Champions Trophy semifinal where England were way off the pace and Stokes sort of pushed them along to a reasonable total that was chased down easily enough. But yeah, again, like England, like there is talent coming through the youth sides. Like, it's not easy to make a U19 final, and yeah, like I know England will have had a lot of concerns over the last 15 years or whatever since cricket went off free to air, and they've had a lot of trouble getting players from outside of the traditional environment. But like there is reason to be optimistic, and the youth teams show that, and yeah, like I don't think England's going to go anywhere. This is like the World Cup win. They hold both World Cups now. This is going to continue to be among the teams to beat for the foreseeable future.
Yep, there's no denying that. And talking about under 19 World Cup final, uh, we have talked about how England is pretty consistent with their template. I think India were completely opposite with it. I mean, they seem to have, I mean, they seem did not seem to have any template in either. I mean, at least not in the T20 World Cup. In the Women's 50 over World Cup, they at least had a plan. But over there in the under 19 World Cup final, actually they were so confident that after obviously once they won the game, Captain Yash Dhul, when asked about if they were under pressure with English bowling, he said they were never under pressure because they were prepared for everything. So looks like they, I mean, unlike the senior team, they had a completely different preparation. Yes.
Like there are different ways to win cricket matches, right? The way the India senior team plays is one that they've identified as being very particular to the players that they build the team around. But as you get different types of players, like the U19 team has a lot of different players to the way the senior team plays. And maybe as they get older, the senior team might adopt that and a different play style. But yeah, we'll have to see because like the way India plays right now, it's not abysmal, despite what some people will tell you. It wins them a lot of matches. It gets them far in tournaments, but it's never been able to go over the line. I don't think that's solely because of just the tactic itself and the players, but it has some glaring weaknesses that come to the fore a little bit too often.
It is almost like you can almost say like it is a good template, but it is not the best template. I mean that is kind of a weird analogy, but that is all I can say about the current template that India follows in the T20 Is because it is kind of conservative. I mean, it is not completely conservative, but it almost seems like the element of conservation is put in there specifically to save themselves from collapses, and sometime it actually works really well. I mean, the chase against Pakistan happened because India plays that way. I mean, there's a good chance if someone like England or any other team would have been in that situation, they could have gone from 30 for 4 to 50 for 6 or 50 for 7. But since India has that kind of template, I guess it sometimes works as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
For as far as Pakistan are concerned, I mean, obviously their women's setup is kind of you know it's up and coming to say the least, while the men's setup is pretty good in at least in the white ball. The red ball setup is still kind of on the rise, I want to say. But I mean, I'm kind of unaware, so I would actually like you to enlighten me about the under 19 setup because we saw Qasim Akram this year. There was also Wazirullah Khan, I think, if I'm remembering his name correctly. So there does look, I mean, it does look like there's some bright prospect in the under 19 sector. But how is the overall, under 19 setup in Pakistan right now?
Like it's interesting because like Pakistan is a big country. It's hard to get to the discover everyone there, and like I feel like you see that a lot at U19 level where most of the players come from you don't get too many players at U19 level coming from weird areas like small villages um and tribal areas and that sort of stuff. It's just harder to find them by that point and train them up to a U19 level. And but yeah, like Pakistan being a big country also means that you will always find talent at youth levels, and a lot of them do go straight to the senior team, as we see quite often. But yeah, like there's definitely a lot of talent at youth sides. The problem is just refining them to the point where um, they reach the senior level, and yeah, like that's always been a big bottleneck. It's a bottleneck for most teams because if you look at most U19 World Cups, most of the players do not make it to the senior level, and that's fine. Um, yeah, like with boxing in particular, like yeah, like the talent is there. The talent is always there. It's just finding it in the first place and developing it. That's always going to be the challenge.
And the kind of the more interesting thing is how obviously the under 19 World Cup has already gone, and ever since it was completed, we have already witnessed a PSL and an IPL being completed. And something that kind of caught my eye was how on India side you have already seen uh, Yash Dhul or Rajvardhan Hangargekar or Rajangat Baba already be a part of IPL in some capacity. But if you see on Pakistan side, even though we saw some, as we've talked about, some good prospects from the Under 19 World Cup, we did not really see them in PSL, or at least that's what I remember. So, uh, does that bug you? You know, these are some of the best young talent in Pakistan. Yes, you should expect them to see them in the premier tournament of the country, shouldn't we?
PFL does have specified slots for uncapped players, and yeah, like like it's always a complicated question, right? Because you want the guys to be given chances, but you also don't want to force teams to play players that aren't good enough. And yeah, like I don't think the PSL should be, the place where you force, where you try to turbocharge development. That should happen at the other the national T20 Cup, which is the one which is only Pakistani players. Like they should be performing well there, and then they should be getting into the PSL as the premier players in the national T20 Cup, and not just because they played for Pakistan U19. Um, but yeah, at the same time, you also like you want to help with improving the ratio of players that go from U19 or just the general youth system into the senior team, and it's not going to help the players aren't if the players aren't being given chances. Yeah, again, like it's a difficult proposition.
I mean, uh, it is not outright a case of forcing the franchisees to draft a player and make them play in the 11 itself. But I guess where I was coming from was to at least you know at least see these players be in the draft, or at least to make a news or a point of it to have someone like a Wajidullah Khan in the draft itself, even if he is not drafted, or at least be the part of reserves, just to have that experience close up, I guess.
Yeah, again, like, I don't want these players to be given easy rides just because they played for Pakistan U19 once. I want them to earn it by continuing to develop. Um, but yeah, like, it's just a complicated thing, right? Like whenever you talk about quotas in cricket, there's always going to be this and that, but yeah, like it's always a complicated thing.
Talking of complicated things, South Africa, their campaigns in all these tournaments ended abruptly due to one reason or the other, and seems like they can never get through. I guess sometimes. I mean, in the under 19 World Cup, as I told you, they kind of uh, got you know pummeled by England. Same happened to them in the women's 50 over World Cup as well, and then I think the least said better about the T20 World Cup, I guess.
South Africa is always it's always a can of worms with South Africa because you'd expect them like with the talent they've had, they should have won a World Cup over the last however long. The only tournaments they've won are 98 ICC knockout and 2014 U19 World Cup. And yeah, like the talent's there. The problem is always how does the talent get anywhere? How does it make it to the senior side? How does it not fly the roost and leave South Africa? Like I don't because look, the question with South Africa always comes down to, choking is in their blood or whatever, and that's not it. That's like I just don't believe that sort of stuff. Like they produce good players, they produce good teams, but it always ends up falling apart at some point or another. Usually it's because they just play a better side that performs better on the day. Because, like, it's not a choke if you concede 350 or whatever they did against England in the U19 semifinal. It's not a choke if you get blown out like they did against England in the Women's World Cup semifinal. But, sometimes it just doesn't go their way. And, yeah, like they'll always feel unlucky about that.
I mean, at least in the T20 World Cup, they did not exactly have, you know, I mean, their campaign was going reasonably well before that Netherlands game happened. I mean, every one of us expected them to win that game, or maybe didn't. But in the Under 19 World Cup and the Women's 50 over World Cup, I think we could see them being a little over dependent on Brevis in the Under 19 World Cup and Cap, the Women's 50 over World Cup. And yet, things happened to them that they did. And despite them having a really good pace attack in the Women's 50 over World Cup, I think they had probably four of the best pacers available. And yet, it was the pace that failed them in the semi-final itself. And I think that is something that often gets kind of ignored with South Africa, how their strength ends up betraying them at the right moment. I mean, their batting kind of fell apart against the Netherlands. Their bowling fell apart against England in the women's 50 over final, and their under 19 side, I guess, it was just not as strong as the other teams, I guess. But that is what is happening with them, isn't it? I mean, their whatever their strength is at a given moment ends up being their weakness at the right time.
Yeah, like again, like that's just how it's been for South Africa. Like they produce good teams, they do good things, but it just doesn't always go their way at crucial moments.
And I mean, honestly, every team or every setup of a country has different kinds of things happening to them, or different kind of plans being made or being executed. But with South Africa, you always see these kind of stereotypical things happening with them, don't you? I mean, if we go back to the 2015 semi-final, you remember a lot of runouts being missed, a lot of fumbling, and even in the 50 over World Cup, Women's 50 over World Cup this year, we saw them dropping Danny White 5 times. I mean, that is just not the fielding of a team that has his World Cup semi-final, is it?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So see, that is my point. I mean, there's South Africa on one end of it, and then there's Australia on kind of the other end of it. I mean, they won the women's 50 over World Cup rather easily, but they had kind of contrasting fortunes in the Under 19 World Cup and the T20 World Cup, I guess. Uh, do you think they kind of also have been having the similar issue that South Africa have been having recently, with not being able to do well in the important games? I mean, we have also seen them kind of fall apart similarly in the under 19, oh, in the 2019 World Cup semi-final against England as well. So it kind of seems like something of a pattern developing.
Yeah, I just don't think Australia is the most balanced team. I don't think they've been for quite a while, and yeah, like it when it goes wrong for them, it really goes wrong. Like it did at the U19 World Cup, like it did at the the last few men's World Cups. Like they're a good team. They're a very good team, that was always able to go far. Again, sort of like India, because Australia didn't have a disastrous World Cup, even though they didn't make the semifinals. They only lost one game. Like it was a bad defeat, but they did win every other game, and there was the one washout against England. So yeah, like Australia is a team that they'll usually beat teams that they're expected to beat, but the toss-up games, those are the ones that'll always be a challenge for them because I just don't feel like they have the quality all the way through that some of the other teams might. And it's a big contrast to their women's team, which does have the quality all the way through that none of the other teams they go up against have.
And it is weird, isn't it? Because actually, I mean, almost all three of the teams follow a similar template, I guess. There's obviously aggressive opening batters, and then there's the middle and lower order that is full of all rounders. Even in the under 19 World Cup, they had someone like Nivedan Radhakrishnan, who I think who's the ambidextrous bowler. He is also a really good bat, I guess. And we have seen with the even though their template is same for all their teams, yet seems like does not work as well as it works for the women's team, I guess.
Again, like it comes down to the personnel you have, and the personnel for the women's team. It's perfect for the way the women's team wants to play. For the other teams, like they have personnel to fill in for the most part, but not the all the way, and that holds in the back and that sees them struggle sometimes when the backs are against the wall.
And honestly, I mean, we're not the kind of people who are going to sit here and compare uh, Mitchell Marsh with Ashley Gardner or Perry. But I guess, as you said, the execution is ultimately the last thing that comes up. And yet, last year we saw Australia obviously win the T20 World Cup. And back then it looked like uh, as we have talked about it's the all-rounders that worked well for them, mainly Stoinis or Mitchell Marsh. And this year it almost looked like it was that middle order again that kind of uh, that won them last year, kind of was their undoing this year, I guess. So does it come down to one of those cases where it's just the execution, the middle order that is off, or is it just that the strategy is not working for them that used to work for them?
Like it worked for them in last year's World Cup because they had, Marsh was in incredible form, Stoinis was in very good form, and they didn't hit that form of this World Cup, and they haven't. I don't think they've been that in form for the last little while. So again, like it just comes down to the personnel you have, and for Australia, the personnel they had at the last T20 World Cup suited the way they were playing, and even though it's a lot of the same people for this one, they're just not performing as well, and that's seen them struggle.
Since we have done all kinds of serious and kind of long stretched out conversations, I think let's be a little more loose for now. And I would like to ask you, so who was your favorite batter or bowler from the under 19 World Cup this year?
I mean, yeah, like Brevis was a lot of fun to watch, obviously, and like I felt like a lot of the chat around him was a little overblown because like he was just a kid, but talks of him immediately going into the test team were I I think they were quite premature, but yeah, like the talent is obviously there, and he's shown over the last few weeks actually with the South African domestic season ongoing. He's been doing quite well in that. He's shown a lot of uh, he's shown that the talent, he's the real thing, and he's definitely going to be going very far very soon. Uh, Yeah, I also think Yashadul was great. We talked about James Rue earlier. He's also doing quite. He also did really well at the tournament. It's a very interesting player to watch. Hasibullah Khan from Pakistan, valuable keeper, valuable opener as well with the team.
Yeah, my
And
apologies for calling him Wazirullah. I think I forgot his name. Sorry.
yeah, yeah, it's all right. And yeah, like there's a lot of really good players. I also want to quickly highlight what I think was the story of the tournament was the UAE finishing ninth. Because I'm pretty sure this happened. The tournament happened before we started this podcast, but yeah, the UAE finishing ninth, I think, was the story of the tournament because like they've never finished that high at any cricket event, and like they're an associate team, and they're not just an associate team; they're an associate team that's very far from full member status, or so you think. Um, but yeah, they beat two full members on the way to finishing ninth. They finished above three full members, and New Zealand, who did not compete at the U19 World Cup, they're they were a very good team. That UAE side, and I think it's very silly that they don't automatically qualify for 2024 because they've since come out and said that the UE still has to go through the qualifiers. It's only the top 11 full members that automatically qualify, not the top 11 teams. But yeah, them's the breaks. Yeah, the UE finishing ninth, I think, was the biggest story of the U19 World Cup.
And it is kind of applaudable, isn't it? Because the under 19 is where you kind of see the future of the teams coming up. I mean, look at it this way. I've been following the under 19 setup for now 16 years, and now that we look back at 2006 and realize that there were teenage Moin Ali or Pujara or Sarfaraz playing back then, and now that they have achieved a lot, it kind of makes you feel you know of kind of being part of that journey, and kind of works that way with the UAE as well, doesn't it? I mean, if we have seen the best of their talents here, do that well. I mean, being ninth, studying ninth in a tournament with teams that have much better infrastructure or overall quality than you is actually a really big achievement, and kudos to them for that. Kind of makes you feel proud to be kind of following these young talents right now, doesn't it? I mean, we have seen some of their exploits already. I guess I think there were a few of the under 19 guys who were part of the T20 World Cup, weren't they?
Yeah, a couple of I think there were two UAE players who were in the U19 squad and also in their squad for this tournament.
And
Uh,
yeah, so that is what I'm talking about. I mean, it kind of it is kind of uh, endearing on that the part that when you realize that you have seen the young talent grow from that point to the even if this is not I mean, the under 19 World Cup and the T20 World Cup weren't that far apart as we are talking about some other talents, but it is kind of great to see them grow and achieve as they did. As you told, the ninth is actually a really great achievement for a country that is still kind of in middle of growing its cricket, I guess.
yeah, like the way the U19 team has developed and the players they've put through, that's definitely the best indication of how UAE cricket is growing. Because like the UAE probably more than any other team, because they're the most successful team like this. They get a lot of complaints about, they're just Pakistan B, they're India C, they're Bangladesh D. They're only, they can't make their own players. They have to buy players from other countries and whatever. But like if you just look at the progress of the U19 team in particular, like these are not players the UAE is buying. They're players that have grown up in the Emirates, and they've managed to become quite good at cricket through growing up in the UAE because the UAE has a very decent setup to develop young players. And yeah, like it's the fact that they're able to finish ninth, they're finishing above several full members, they're beating full members at these events. It shows that they're doing something right, and you only hope that they continue to get better at it. Like if you look at the ICC membership criteria for full membership, UE takes quite a few of them, and one that they take that a lot of other countries don't. A lot of other countries, that you might put want to push forward to full membership don't, such as Nepal, for example, is that the UE has a very good U19 setup. Nepal does not. And even countries like Scotland, the Netherlands, they struggle at U19 level, while the UE has only been getting better.
And it is great to see, isn't it? I mean, uh, from what we have seen, I mean, for India or Pakistan, how the under 19 World Cup tournaments have given us quite a few talents that have served the teams long term. And as you said, we have already seen two of this year's under 19 guys play for UAE, and I just hope we can see more of them. Yes, that is that for today. And once the Australia, England, and India versus New Zealand series is done, we can get back and cover them up. Right?
Yep. See you
Okay.
then.
See you then. Bye.
Bye.